And thank you very much for staying with me on Newsfile. Again, welcome. Remember that Newsfile is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and as close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Also brought to you by Robert & Sons. Seeing is definitely believing. Way Lead, home is where one starts from. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Duraplast, where Duraplast goes, water flows. DBS Industries. SEMA, helping people, businesses to succeed. My guests are joining me now, and we'll start with that very controversial matter of the LGBTQ plus bill, which is set to go to Parliament. We'll get some details about that very shortly. And that is why we are joined in the studio by, I should call him the lead sponsor of the bill, Sam George, Sam Onneto George, is MP for Ningo Pram constituency. And he is in the studio with me. Sam, thank you very much once again.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to you and our viewers.
Also joining me is Robert Amoafo, who is a former country director, Amnesty International, and he joins us via Zoom. We're also joined today by Dr. Charles Rakuber. He's a chief policy analyst of the Ghana Institute of Policy Options, and he will join us very, very shortly. I remember that you can join us on our many social media platforms, indeed, as we have this conversation. So before we get into the specifics of where we are with that particular bill, I want you to listen to how this has played out this week. We'll hear from the Speaker of Parliament, and we'll also hear from Amnesty International. Watch.
All those threatening the members of Parliament who are leading this bill, please be warned.
Thank you.
We cannot be threatened in our homes.
Yes.
This must be stated loud and clear to those who have come to do business in Ghana, those who represent their countries and think that they are right. We also represent our country. And they can never dictate to us as to how to live or not to live in this world. And I'm very clear in my mind that this House, the Parliament of Ghana, will pass this bill as soon as possible. I have gone through it, and I'm sure, and I will confirm what Honorable Sam George has said, that this bill will be a reference point for many, many countries. It's very detailed, very comprehensive, and really a bill that you can refer to as justice. It's gone in accordance with all the provisions of our Constitution, our laws, and our international obligations. It is a law that even those who are against it will find it difficult not to accept it. And I want to assure all of you that we'll create room this week for the bill to be presented to Parliament officially. Wow. We'll refer it to the appropriate committee, and it will go through the process. We invite anybody who has anything to add to or take away to appear before the committee. The committee will present the report. We'll take it through all the stages of processing the bill, and inshallah, it will be passed this year. I know God will see us through. Amen. Those who are thinking otherwise, please be advised. Some members of parliament who may not have the heart to go with us, don't worry. We know about doubting Thomases. Tomorrow you will see the light.
Strong words there from the Speaker of Parliament. And I have with me Sam George. So you were at this event?
Yes.
Well, what event was this?
This was when we officially presented the draft bill to Mr. Speaker to commence and kickstart the entire process of the legislation. Okay,
so when he started by talking about threats against MPs and et cetera, and warns the people to be warned, etc., to back off, what was the context? Who was he referring to? Has there been threats?
Well, we have seen some very interesting actions. I mean, on Easter Monday, the Australian High Commissioner, for example, was in my constituency. Went to my constituency, met with people under the guise of a cycling tour, but met with people and ran around the place, and then posted on his official Twitter and Facebook page, including the Australian High Commission, calling me out for not doing my job in terms of sanitation and road construction, and rather focusing on legislation. And so I responded to him on his official handle and said to him that if he was well educated, he would know that the role of an MP is not fixing the road. That's the role of central government, the Minister for Roads. The role of sanitation is the duty of the Assembly, the DCE, not the MP. But the role of the MP is legislation, and I'm doing my legislation. Then subsequent to that, we met at the Hearts Kotoko game. And there he came and accosted me and threatened me that I would never get a visa to any European country. And I said to him that he has not heard of Inzulezu. And in the middle of all of those, that confrontation.
He said that to you, that you don't get a visa?
Yeah, he said to me.
Any European country?
Yes, and that if
not only to Australia, but to...
No, and he mentioned the United States and all, and said that if I ever stepped in Europe, I'll be arrested. And I said to him, well, he's in Ghana and I will not be threatened. And that if he did not take care, I would make sure that the laws dealt with him, because he had breached several laws in Ghana. And in the middle of all of that, there were a number of the Hearts fans who saw the back and forth, and some of them wanted to shake him up a bit, and so he ran to the military. The next day, he writes to the Speaker that I had assaulted him and caused a mob to attack him, you know, and all of that. And that's what the Speaker said clearly to him. We will not be threatened, we will not be intimidated in our country. You know, if we really wanted to call a spade, that gentleman would have been expelled from our country, because he's broken several laws. His first interview that he had in this country was with Bolare, in which he broke the Children's Act of Ghana, because he went out there and announced that his 14-year-old son he had come to Ghana with was gay. I mean, that's against the Child's Act of Ghana. You don't put out such information about a minor in public. I mean, several infractions of the law by this High Commissioner, who needs to be reined in one way or the other.
Are you intimidated? Because when he says you're not going to get a visa, you'll be arrested, and you are a member of parliament, so you travel for official business. That is a likely possibility.
Do I look like I'm intimidated? Do you think that any... Look, the laws of the land are not the whims and caprices of a renegade High Commissioner. Not at all. Okay? On what basis am I going to be arrested? By who? In which jurisdiction? For what reasons? You get it? I mean, the law is clear. I mean, you cannot just...
let me guess, for violating or threatening to violate the rights of other human beings.
There's no law like that. There's no law like that anywhere in the world. There is no law like that anywhere in the world. And so I'm the least perturbed about any of those things.
So you also travel?
I definitely will, and I certainly will. When the need arises, I will. And nobody has any rights to curtail those. You must have basis in law. You know, rights are not absolute, but they can be curtailed. But there must be a fundamental basis in law for the curtailment of those rights. I have breached no such law. There are persons who preach hate. There are persons who preach all kinds of extreme measures. action or blacklisting can be taken against such persons. I challenge anyone to show any evidence of such actions on my part. I've been very minded in what I'm doing. And when I act as a legislator from Ghana, the oath I swore on the 7th of January 2021, when I was being sworn into office for my second term, was to defend the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
Not the European Constitution.
Not the European Constitution, not the American Constitution, the 1992 Constitution. My fidelity is to this Constitution. And this Constitution in Article 39 is clear on what the role of our culture. In fact, I can read for the purposes of our listeners and our viewers, because everything in this bill is from this Constitution. Article 39, which is in Chapter 6, under the Directive Principles of State Policy, it says, subject to Clause 2 of this article, the state shall take steps to encourage the integration of, and here, listen, appropriate customary values into the fabric of national life through formal and informal education and the conscious introduction of cultural dimensions to relevant aspects of national planning. And in 2, it says, that's 39.2, the state shall ensure that appropriate customary and cultural values are adapted and developed as an integral part of the growing needs of the society as a whole. And in particular, that traditional practices which are injurious to the health and well-being of the person are abolished. I'm based and grounded in law and pushing this legislation. So, except any other jurisdiction is going to say that I should, and again, I would always side with the Constitution of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana over the Constitution of any other country.
Sam, stay with me. Maybe on this preliminary comment, let me just take a quick input from my other guests who are joining me virtually. Let me bring in Robert. Robert, I mean, former country director, Amnesty International. You just had there some George disclose, and the speaker, he said the speaker was speaking about the threats on those who are sponsoring the bill, including a threat, Sam George says, by the Australian High Commissioner to Ghana, who says he will not get a visa, and if he travels, he'll be arrested, and the ensuing conversation at the game. What's your reaction to that? I mean, in the midst of this is a legislation that is being pushed to the Parliament to consider. Sam George says based on the Constitution. Where do you stand on that issue of foreign intervention in the process of sending a bill, legitimately so, through Parliament in a sovereign country?
Thank you very much, and good morning to you and your viewers. And good morning to Honorable Sam
A very
George.
good morning to you, Robert.
Yes, I think that first of all, I do not side with the ambassador if that has been his action, to in any way or any form threaten a state legislator in the manner in which Honorable Sam George has described. I mean, if that is what happened, I do not subscribe in any way or form. I think that we should show some sort of respect and also support in the manner of ensuring that people are not threatened by what they believe in. I think that he should be able to travel and do his work and learn and also be part of the society as a whole. What I do not agree with is his opinion of the law in the said Article 39. And then also, I do not agree entirely with the bill. I think it is unnecessary and it's unfounded in any form. I think it is marred by myths and misconceptions about sexuality, where none of the people proposing or people pushing the law understand the issues that they are legislating. And looking at the bill, I have read it so many times, and we are currently writing a paper in my university on how this thing is based on myths and misconceptions that need to be clarified. Okay. Or else it would have some dire effects.
I'm going to come to the specifics shortly of the arguments for and against, as we've heard, and where we are with the bill soon. So we'll get to the details. But let me bring in Dr. Charles Rakuber on that point quickly. Dr. Rakuber, thank you for your time again. Thank you for making time this Saturday morning to join us on Newsfile. I want your quick preliminary comments on the disclosures Sam George had made about the Australian ambassador and this whole, this whole push and perception of a foreign intervention in a sovereign country's push towards passing a bill on this matter. Well, what do you have to say about what you've just heard? Hello, Dr. Charles Rakuber. Okay, let's we'll fix that and come back to Dr. Rakuber on that all-important subject, because that's has been a major part of this conversation about the threats of foreign sanctions. I will reserve a bit of time to look at that, briefly, broadly, and the fears that this might have consequences for the economy going forward, in addition to the individuals who may be involved. Let's go to some of the specifics now. So, George, the debate has been going on for a while. Before we get to the specifics of the central arguments, where are we now in terms of the bill actually coming to the floor? Do we have Dr. Rakuber now? Dr. Rakuber, do I have you? Hello, Doc.
It's gone again. Hello.
Okay, we have a terrible connection to him. Sam, so give me where are we? Lay out the roadmap towards pass it for me. As we speak today, where's the bill?
The bill has come to Parliament. We'll have the first reading, but the whole process is such that we presented the bill to the Speaker. The Speaker referred it to his legal department for advice to see if it complied with the constitutional requirements for a private member's bill. When that was determined, the Speaker signed a warrant of gazette. We took it to the government printing house, Assembly Press. It was there for 14 days. It matured and came back with a certificate of gazette. Once that was done, we then forwarded it to the Business Committee of the House last week, or just this week that has ended. And yesterday, when the business statement for next week, which is actually, as it stands, the last week of Parliament sitting for this meeting, it's been programmed to be for first reading. So now where we are is that it's been advertised in the business statement for next week. So on Monday, it's supposed to be one of 5 private members' bills that are supposed to go through the first reading. After the first reading is done of the bill, it will be referred by the Speaker to the appropriate committee. That committee would accept public memoranda from the public. The memoranda will come in, the committee would sit on it, debate on it, look at the value of the memoranda that have come in and possible amendments that would arise out of this memoranda. And then on the basis of that, we'll take it through a winnowing process to fine-tune what amendments are. And then we come back to the floor for the second reading with a report of the committee. The second reading of the bill is where the debate really happens. So that's where we're going to go by what we call the clause-by-clause consideration. So there are 25 clauses in our bill. When we pick clause 1, if there are 10 amendments to it, we will take each amendment one by one and debate it. Those of us who are the sponsors of the bill and the many other members of Parliament who support the bill will debate with whoever is sponsoring an amendment the value of that amendment. If the amendment is one that is in line with the object of the bill and seeks to strengthen the bill and make it a better bill, I'm sure there's going to be very little objection to it. We're going to just look at the value of it and accept it, and then that amendment will be incorporated into the bill. As and when there is a disagreement on an amendment, that is where the debates will happen. Detailed debates will happen, and the Speaker would eventually put it to a vote, a voice vote, and the yeas will carry it or the nays will. If someone is unhappy with that, the person can then call for a vote by head count. And so basically we'll do that for each amendment, for each clause till we run through the 25. We're minded that there could be an attempt to abuse the system, to just delay the process by filing so many amendments that are needless. But that's why the winnowing committee would work to winnow it down to substantive amendments so that there's no filibustering.
Did you say you anticipate that there might be frustration?
Well, that's a possibility.
Okay.
That's a possibility. So, but I mean, Parliament in our standing orders has taken care of that. I mean, so that people don't abuse the filibustering process. So we have a winnowing process that exists that helps to reduce the timelines for some of these amendments. And then we'll take you through. But my appeal to you, your media house, will be like I've made on several other platforms, and they've all agreed to, is that the second consideration stage of the bill, which is where the debates will happen, we'll be grateful if your media house will carry it live, because the people's representatives are going to be debating and stating their positions on aspects of the bill. It will be important that the people who have sent us there know the positions that their representatives are taking on these issues. If there's the need for a vote, People must see how people are voting, and then we'll be in a better place for us to make value judgments. Because I keep saying that pushing this bill, yes, personally, I hold a similar position, but the urge to lead this has been driven by the outcome of town hall meetings I held in my constituency, 18 of them.
And all
18, not in one of those meetings did anybody rise up and say to me, step back from this. Everybody said, go ahead. My two traditional councils that I represent, the Ningo Traditional Council and Prampram Traditional Council, are fully in support of this. I represent the people of Ningo and Prampram. So once they have spoken, I must do their bidding. So I would expect every MP to do
let me ask you, the Speaker of Parliament says he expects that the bill will be passed by the end of the year. Are you that optimistic?
Yes. The second consideration stage will most likely happen when Parliament reconvenes in October. Between when we reconvene and when the budget will be read sometime in November, it gives us about 3 to 4 weeks. I think that's enough time for us to go through the winnowing process and the second consideration stage. And if that is done, the third stage is just a mere formality. So I am confident that before we rise in December, we should pass this bill.
Let's go to the specifics of where we are now with the bill and the arguments for it. But let me kick you off with a question. Since this became public, as in we saw the bill for the first time, there have been a lot of arguments. You've debated people on Twitter, you debated people on radio and television. Has any of the arguments softened your position on the matter?
Well, I in all honesty, I've spoken with the drafting office. I think there are two issues that I think I would even sponsor an amendment on. Two issues that have to do with definition. Because if you look at our bill, in section 2 of the bill, that's the interpretation section, and we've defined almost everything in there. I think that two of the issues that kind of leave some confusion and ambiguity in people's minds. Even though originally I don't see it, but after listening to counter positions, I believe that there are two of the definitions that we need to tighten up, and so we will work on that.
Which are these? I'm curious.
When we get in there.
No,
don't worry.
Because
it's you see, like I said, there are two amendments that I think I'm willing to sponsor an amendment to tighten. No, we are going to go into that.
So we can all illuminate.
Don't worry, you see the amendments when we get there.
Okay. Hopefully, Robert Amoafo will touch on some of those, and maybe you can tell me.
Sure.
I mean, but you definitely don't want to put this out now.
Not now.
I'm wondering why.
Not now.
Because the debate has already started.
Well, so right now,
opinion before it goes to Parliament.
It is with the greatest of respect to your production team and the fact that your viewers, this is a big platform, that I chose to do this, because I'd actually declined to do any further media engagement, because right now we're moving on to into the stage where it's parliamentary work. Okay, the details of the sweetness of the pudding is in his eating. We're getting into the parliamentary business of scrutiny and working on the bill, and so most of this commentary right now is really neither here nor there. But like I said, I believe that the two amendments to definitions that I think I want to look at again.
So what's your central argument? Why is this important? I mean, we've lived with our friends LGBTQ plus people for years. They've not hurt anybody. They lived in a society. Everybody growing up knew somebody who had the tendency or was showing. I lived in Adabraka, and I must disclose, I had, right opposite my house, there was a gay pub. I mean, I come home at 11 from work, and I see people standing by the roadside doing stuff. Men to men, boys to boys, girls to girls. I mean, so why do we need another law?
Well, that's a fundamental question most people have asked. And I say to them that Section 104, this is not a new law. This is not introducing a new legislation into our legislative framework. This is actually expanding on existing legislation. So when I get calls from international media houses and even local media houses who say you're seeking to criminalize homosexuality, I say to them, no, I'm seeking to expand legislation, existing legislation on homosexuality. Section 104 of Act 29, which is the Criminal Offences Act, is clear on unnatural carnal knowledge. And you read the law, the letter of the law tells you what it is, the spirit of the law makes you realize that in 1960, the intent of that legislation was to criminalize homosexuality. Gayism was the main thing at the time. And so you see that the wording of it is actually focused on gayism, the gayism aspect of homosexuality. But 61 years on, there have been new variations. So basically, this bill is to tighten and strengthen the legal framework. We've seen the police arrest persons accused of or alleged to have been involved in this, but they are unable on the basis of Section 104 to carry out proper prosecution of the acts because Section 104 is no longer, in quote, fit for purpose given the scope. Like I keep saying, in 1960 was basically gayism. In 2021, you have almost a half of the alphabet gone in this LGBTQIAAAPP plus phenomenon. Now, again, you also have our cultural values that need to be protected. I've read Article 39 of the Constitution to you. And most importantly, is the growing boldness of advocacy for something that's illegal. And I've seen a video making the rounds on social media I agree very well with. I have my kid. It's my kid. I train my kid. I take care of my kid. You have no right whatsoever to come and indoctrinate my kid in a way and manner that I am not comfortable with. You're seeing the advocacy of LGBTQ+ in our secondary schools. They're setting up recruitment drives in our secondary schools. They have pimps in the secondary schools who they pay money to.
You know this how?
Well, we've done a lot of research, and recently the headmistress of Ola Girls came out to complain.
True.
Giving credence to the fact that we're making, the point that we're making. And it's not just in Ola Girls, it's widespread. There are several community-based organizations.
We've always had SUPI in our schools.
No, you see, but you've never had people actively recruiting and being paid to be recruiters. That's what's going on now. That's the boldness that has come into this category of perversion, for want of a better phrase, where now people are being paid to go out and recruit young girls into SUPI, to go out and recruit boys to get into active homosexuality. Now it's becoming a commercial enterprise. There is money being thrown at it. That is becoming a threat to our cultural and national fiber. Look, some community-based organizations that work with some government institutions that are supposed to offer some sexual support by way of maybe provision of condoms and lubricants and stuff, have gone beyond that and are actually now pushing the agenda of homosexuality. And we have evidence of this. You understand me? So you have, and to top it all up, you saw the opening of an advocacy office that had members of the diplomatic corps show up at such function. Now, the members of the diplomatic corps showing up at such function is an affront to Article 41 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. And I'll just read that for you. Article 41 of the Vienna Convention is pretty clear. It's pretty clear what it is that you must do when you're in a country. Because and that for me was a wake-up call. When I saw diplomats show up at this function, Article 41 says, of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, it says, without prejudice to their privileges and immunities, and that's diplomats, it is the duty of all persons enjoying such privileges and immunities to respect the laws and regulations of the receiving state, in this case Ghana. They also have a duty not to interfere in the internal affairs of that state. So if you have Section 104 of the Criminal Offences Act criminalizing homosexuality, any diplomat who goes to a function that seeks to sponsor or advocate or support this illegality is breaching Article 41 of the Vienna Convention. And the effrontery with which they did it, the ease with which they did it, and the apparent lack of response from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs prompted a response from Parliament. There was an outrage in this country at the opening of that office. We are the people's representatives. And so I went ahead and made a statement in March on the floor of the House and said the government must immediately step up and shut down that office, which we must give credits to government. That was done with expedition. But then we didn't see the sanctions that we expected to see follow those who ought to have known better and who went out to support it. But then this bill is in direct response to the growing trend of advocacy. And that's why when you read the bill, the most punitive measures are actually for advocacy and not even the act itself. You get it? There's been a lot of spin that, oh, if you're caught in the act, you go to jail for up to 10 years. That's not true. That's not true. Okay?
But the bill proposes penalty, including jail terms.
Absolutely.
Yes. But you say it's not 10 years.
No. It's a maximum of 5 years.
For the most serious crime under the proposal.
For any, if you read Section 6, and Section 6 of the bill is where we have stated out what the offenses are in this bill. And look, I'll just read what Section 6.2, which imposes the penalty. It says, a person who commits an offense under paragraph A, B, C, D, E, F, or G of subsection 1 commits a second-degree felony and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of not less than 750 penalty units and not more than 5,000 penalty units, or to a prison term, to a term of imprisonment of not less than 3 years and not more than 5 years, or both. So maximum jail time for any of the offenses which are the acts of homosexuality are maximum of 5 years. And look, we looked at international best practice and looked at our own jurisdiction. If you read from the BBC, 25th of July 2015, 2 Canadian religious leaders whose religious beliefs allow them to engage in polygamy, Mr. Winston Blackmore and his former brother-in-law, James Ola, were jailed each for 5 years on account of polygamy. So even in Canada, people who practice polygamy are being jailed for 5 years. So if it is...
Is that where you borrowed the time?
No, we actually looked at our Criminal Offences Act and looked at the punishment for second-degree felonies. You see, in the bill, we have second-degree felonies and misdemeanors. So the actions that are second-degree felonies, we looked at the commensurate jail sentencing or the sentencing regime in our current legislation for second-degree felonies. And most times it's between 3 to 5 years. And we stayed within that. We didn't extend it. There were people who appeared before us as we worked on this bill who said we should make it 10 years. But we said, look, for us, the main thrust of this bill is actually not punishment. It's actually reformation. And so even when you have been found guilty and sentenced, there's the opportunity for you to recant and go through a reformative process and be taking out, the law says that if a person recants during prosecution or even after sentencing, that person must be allowed to go through a reformative process as determined by the court. Upon successful completion of the reformative process, you're free to go home.
Stay with me, Sam. Let me bring in Robert. Robert, so if Sam has cited the example from Canada, was it?
Yeah, Canada.
If the Canadians criminalize polygamy, which of course isn't the case in Ghana, why shouldn't Ghana, based on our cultural values, also take a similar stance on a subject that there is almost unanimity on among Ghanaians in terms of the overwhelming majority of people who, do not support homosexuality, to also criminalize homosexuals? They can jail somebody for up to 5 years for polygamy. Why can't we do same for homosexuals, which indeed our cultural values frown on?
Thank you very much. And first of all, to say that we are not here to learn from other people's things that they are doing, if we do not agree with them. Of course, if in Ghana we still have people doing polygamy. We have certain cultures that go ahead and still have issues of polygamy going on. So that is not the basis of discussion. I think that the idea is that if another country has that, there are people there who could fight against it if they also don't believe in it. And there are people who I'm sure would be speaking against it now over there. And so we are, in our context, we accept polygamy. It goes on. We have instances where there are child marriages and all of that in our country, and it's still going on. And so I think that when we are talking about the issue of homosexuality or sexual orientation of LGBTI plus people, let's not bring in other things that do not bear any merit on the issue that we are discussing. I think that pinning this on cultural values and popularity is
Robert, just a quick one on the first point you made. I mean, doesn't that argument about what Western countries doing in their country, doesn't that become relevant when we have Western countries tell us that what we are attempting to do is fundamentally against human rights and that we should not do so? And there have been threats of sanctions that we've heard from some quarters. And yet they criminalize polygamy, which is reverse, we accept locally. Isn't that why that is relevant, that example is relevant?
No, and because one, we have this perception that, like I mentioned before, there are some myths. And these myths are, one of them is what we are discussing here. The underlying discussion is somebody being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender is not a Western thing. It's not something that is coming from West. No country called UK or US or Canada packed homosexuality and came to pour it on Ghanaians and said some Ghanaians will be gay. And so let's not have this discussion around the idea that homosexuality is a Western import. It is not. We have, like you mentioned before, we have had homosexuals in Ghana, even in Africa, since the beginning of the world and wherever it may be. And all the things that many people mention, even the underpinning discussion by some of the proponents of this bill, clearly shows that homosexuality is not something that started by the West or brought in by the West. So that myth must be cleared, that, like you also mentioned, there are gays in Ghana, they've existed, they've been amongst the people for so long, they have not shown any distraction to anybody, they have not done anything that destroys our economy or destroys people violate human rights or violate a person or cause violence against anybody. There are people who exist every day, they go to work, they are human beings like any other person, and we haven't recorded any research that has shown that a gay person has caused somebody to die or somebody to have some bad effects because they had sex. Two consenting adults went into their privacy and had sex and came out and continued their life. So I think that myth around the idea that the West is bringing in something is false. It is only the idea that we should understand that even in the West, if you look at the US state and case, 50 years ago, this discussion was being had as we are having now. There was a member of parliament, just like we have Honorable Sam George sitting in your studios, also doing the same thing as is happening now. So it is not too foreign even to them that they have had this discussion before. And so it is important that we bring all into this discussion and to perspective that it is not a foreign thing, it is a human thing. Sexuality is not a foreign thing, it is a spectrum, and we are all on a sexuality spectrum. And so if somebody is found on a spectrum of having being gay, the person is not wrong, the person is a human being and must be respected and given all the human rights and protection as expected. Okay,
Robert, let's go to the fundamental legal document which guides us all, our Constitution. And the proponents and sponsors of this bill have been at pains, and some judge have referred to that on the show, reading from the constitutional provision that says that subject, of course, that of this article, talking about the Directive Principle of State Policy, the state shall take steps to encourage the integration of appropriate customary values into the fabric of national life through formal and informal education and the conscious introduction of cultural dimensions to relevant aspects of national planning, and that the state shall ensure that appropriate customary and cultural values are adapted and developed as an integral part of the growing needs of society as a whole, and in particular, the traditional practices which are injurious to the health and well-being of the person are abolished. So it is under this that we've seen the campaign to abolish something like female genital mutilation. But under this too, we've seen this campaign, this push to pass a law that explicitly forbids something that many believe, as the Constitution says, it is not appropriate customary and cultural values, which the Constitution says we should ensure that doesn't happen. So how do you respond to that? Because this is anchored on a constitutional provision.
So it's important to also bring into perspective what appropriate cultural values are, what appropriateness means. As you would see, as you read, as one of the articles say, harmful and something that is not, something that is harmful and injurious and to people. I shudder to ask and also to find out how two consenting adults going into their privacy, having sex, is injurious to anybody at all. People mentioning the idea that it is not our culture. What sexuality is a culture? I mean, it's only in this bill that I'm seeing that there's an attempt to define appropriate, you know, and therefore, which means that this is an opportunity for us to all discuss broadly, not just for the sexuality that we're talking about, but broadly, what is appropriate cultural and practices of Africa, of Ghanaians, is women in the North who were not allowed to be part of masculine or male discussions, who are now able to sit in parliament because we have learned from other places that women can participate. Is it appropriate cultural practice? You know, is it injurious to us? Is it harmful to us? You know, those are the questions that come to my mind, and I hope that we'll be able to answer those questions. I think it's important that we understand that if you're talking about something that is appropriate, and you're talking about something that is injurious, they are two different things, or something that does not harm anybody in any way. It is not a matter of popularity. If it was a matter of popularity and everybody agreeing to it, many of the decisions taken in Parliament would not have been taken. And we have seen a lot of backlash on certain decisions generally in public about some of the things that are happening, because popularity is not the thing. It's a matter of understanding that how does a person having sex in their privacy have any effect on any individual as two consenting adults who do not harm anybody by their existence.
Sam George?
You see, I'm just going to pick up a few issues he's raised. First and foremost, I'm glad you pointed out to him the inconsistency in the position by the proponents of this LGBTQ thing. First and foremost, when you talk about polygamy, they say it's a Western thing. Let the West deal with their issues. If there are people there who are not comfortable with it, let them speak. You accept that if a section of society is not comfortable with a certain position, they can speak about it. So why do you have a problem with a large majority, an overwhelming majority of Ghanaians speaking out against the perversion of LGBTQ and saying that we don't have a right to speak our voice? That's the intolerance of the proponents of LGBTQ that we must point out, first and foremost. And it shows you the inconsistency. When it suits them, they say, do it this way. When they keep shifting the goalpost. Secondly, he asked the question, what does two consenting adults having sex, what harm does it do? Well, you are very uninformed on what homosexuality is about. Homosexuality is not just about sex. And go and check all the jurisdictions where homosexuality have started. It's not just about consensual sex between two adults. It moves to the redefinition of what marriage is. It moves to what the curriculum of school kids becomes in accepting this perversion.
That's in the comprehensive sexuality.
Absolutely. It then moves from there to even affecting the livelihoods of sportsmen. The Tokyo Olympic Games. Female American sports athletes or female American athletes have been kicked off their slots by transgender men. That affects the economics of an individual. Now go to the United States, go to the European capitals where homosexuality has been made legal, and see how much of taxpayers' money, public money, is used to have healthcare facilities simply catering for the problems of the homosexual community. Because the health conditions of homosexuals is completely different from what we're talking about. The anal tears and the anal warts and all the kinds of medical complications they have. In this country, today, the Ghana AIDS Commission gets support in the region of almost, 200 million? Ghana cedis or $200 million from foreign donors, and a large chunk of that is going to curb the menace of HIV/AIDS. The section of our society that is pushing the prevalence of AIDS in Ghana is men having sex with men, homosexuals. So taxpayers' money or monies that could have been channeled to finding beds for our wives to give birth is being used to take care of buying antiretroviral drugs for people who are increasing the prevalence of HIV/AIDS because they're having homosexual sex. And you're asking me, what is the effect on the public? That's the effect on the public I'm showing to you. Look, this is not a morality bill. Heterosexuals do not go around saying that, and there are heterosexuals who have kinky sex and all kinds of things in their bedroom. They don't come around and legislate or advocate that we should accept their way of heterosexual sex. They keep it in the confines of their bedroom, and people respect their privacy. But when you want to take out what is supposed to be your private, intimate moment and determine that that must become our way of life, and determine that our kids must be taught that, and determine that there must be pressure on an already stretched healthcare facility in this country, we will not sit down quietly and watch it. And the argument that homosexuality has been with us from time immemorial,
but that's true, hasn't it?
I keep asking a question. Show me one traditional council that has accepted homosexuality as a part of us. From time immemorial, individuals who show those tendencies have been seen as pariahs. Our tradition and customs have not associated with them. And someone sent me a fantastic text message. Armed robbery was not an import from the West. So why have we not said that because it didn't come from the West, let's allow it and let's accept it? It was not an import from the West. We have it here, but we have laws that fight against it. So whether it is an import from the West or not is neither here nor there. That's a very moot point. The point is that society accepts it. Is it comfortable for us? Yes, he said 50 years ago, 60 years ago in the United States. In fact, it was in 1952 that homosexuality was moved out from being a medical condition. Until 1952, it was a medical condition in the United States. Until 30 years ago, the WHO, the World Health Organization, viewed homosexuality as a medical condition, a mental health condition. It saw it as schizophrenia and pedophilia and necrophilia. In 1952,
but science has evolved.
Well,
and that has changed.
That's not true.
Why are we not moving with that time?
Hold it. That is the myth and misconception the LGBTQ community pushes out.
But science has changed.
It's not true. In 1952, the decision by the United States government to move homosexuality away from being treated like the way schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease and necrophilia and pedophilia were treated, and bestiality, was a political decision. It was not a decision based on votes of scientists. It was not based on any scientific finding. It was a vote of politicians who had been lobbied by the LGBTQ lobby. The same thing happened with the World Health Organization. No science backs the move. In fact, the biggest investigative work into the human genome is the Human Genome Project. Okay, that's the biggest development, and the LGBT community have sponsored over 20 researchers into the human genome system, and they have not been able to identify a homosexual gene. We've been able to identify genes that make people obese, genes that make people angry. We are able to trace and sequence all of these genes and identify what will make somebody a sanguine and choleric. All of these minute details, even making you prone to cancer and specific kinds of cancer, have been traced to a gene. All of these detailed studies have not been able to identify a homosexual gene. So when they tell you that it's a science, I dare and challenge them to show you the science. One science journal. Again, another myth and misconception. Let me give you one last. Yeah. Another myth and misconception they give you is that the whole world is doing this. That's not true. Europe has about 50 countries. In Europe, only 18 countries have made homosexuality legal. Only 18 in Europe. There are 195 countries in the world. Only 30 have made homosexuality legal. So they should not put out that misconception that the whole world is moving and Ghana is staying back. Ghana is standing with the majority of the world. 165 countries still see this as a perversion, and our law will be tightened and strengthened to ensure that we safeguard our culture, our tradition, and ensure that this perversion remains in the confines of those who want to practice it and will not become the norm for our society.
Robert?
Yes, thank you very much. And it's rather interesting that a politician will be calling a researcher into sexual orientation, gender identity expert as ignorant. It's rather sad that he's showing a lot of ignorance in, like I mentioned before, sexuality and gender identity issues. Like I mentioned before, you do not throw about words like he did, like LG, and they are bringing LGBT and currently I'm writing a paper that shows clearly, like, politicians like this always pin sexuality and these laws around the sexual activity of a sexual activity. Let me be very specific. Sexual activity of gay men. in the string of sexual minorities, as we call it, there are a number of them, and as you have listed in your law, you can see. So this idea of pushing this negative thought of anal tear and all of that is wrong. Now let me clarify this idea you mentioned and wrongfully misinforming us about the HIV issue in Ghana. I think it's important to understand that HIV amongst key populations, as we call them, which include men who have sex with men, and remember, this is not gay men alone with men who have sex with men. It is heterosexual men are included in men who have sex with men. HIV prevalence amongst key populations is high because of things like this. And if you read the research properly, you see that criminalization of men who have sex with men is a key thing that continues to push people into hiding, and therefore does not allow them to come out for sexual and sexual and HIV services, because they are afraid to go to the hospital, they'll be reported, they will be arrested, and all of that because they did, as you have mentioned, Honorable, that they have had their privacy and something has happened to them and they are going for services. Like a heterosexual will have sex with a man will have sex with a woman and catch a disease or something. Just the same thing, they cannot go for services because of such a law that we are trying to push now. And also the issue of the prevalence. Do you know that the prevalence amongst heterosexual people is higher than that within the key populations? Because key populations numbers are calculated by the number of people that are found within a particular study. So it is not this idea of pushing it is high. Yes, it's high amongst because of laws like this that is being made. So if this law is being passed and is going to push more people into hiding, is not going to help them attain get HIV services, as heterosexuals who have a higher prevalence could have the service, then it is a sense of discrimination, as already we can talk about. Now you talk about this idea of World Health Organization and the US. It's wrong. You are misinforming us. The idea is that the World Health Organization has removed this thing from the idea of this being a mental illness from its system long time ago. So then why would you come and mention US? We're not talking about US. You accept medication from the World Health Organization. World Health Organization is saying that let's do vaccination. We are doing. Let's do whatever it is we are following. The World Health Organization is saying that criminalizing somebody for having private sexual activity and somebody identifying. So you also let me quickly, a lot of things you mentioned that brings up these myths that you have. The idea that when you criminalize sexual activity and the law doesn't criminalize, it criminalizes a person. That is why I say that sexuality is not an act. It is an individual. If you say that they've not found any homosexual gene, where is the heterosexual gene that they have found? You know, where in the research have we found that there's a specific gene that says A is heterosexual and B is not? The reason why we cannot find a homosexual gene is because there's nothing like that. And therefore, sexuality is an individual who is born with a particular sexuality and they live as a human being. They have their sex in their private, as you mentioned. They do not, nobody, I think it is wrong also that you create this impression that some people are standing out there and promoting and recruiting, and you mention all these words. That is also a wrong assertion. The point is that LGBT organizations are created because of things like this, like we are doing now. There are a lot of LGBT people, and like I said, there's research that I can show you, who are facing violence and human rights abuse because of the existence of the Section 104.
But Robert, on that point, there is also specific evidence. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the Ola girl's headmistress, who said, held the PTA and told the parents that it's come to their attention, the school is alarmed, that there's active recruitment of their girls by LGBTQ activists who are trying to recruit these girls to join them. That's a different conversation, which is what has alarmed a lot of people.
Yes, so that is why I say that then there's a law already that exists. Those are children, as you have mentioned. and no adult is expected to engage in any sexual activity with a child. Whatever sexual activity it is, heterosexual, homosexual, our law clearly criminalizes that. So why don't we just use that law against that? If people are recruiting, what are they recruiting for? If they are telling the children something that that it is wrong, that you think that they shouldn't hear, like any other thing that we say children shouldn't hear, we should stop them from doing that by ensuring that we implement the existing law. Why do we have to create another law that would seek to criminalize an individual for just being who they are, for going to work every morning and being a human being? And the only part of their life that anybody or a parliamentarian will be interested in is the sex that they are having, and therefore want to criminalize them for having sex and pushing this agenda of people recruiting, which is false.
But when you say false, when you say false, I mean, I just mentioned a particular example.
That is why I'm saying that if that is the case, and which I hope that I'll also find out if it is, that there are laws that seeks to criminalize anybody who does a thing like that. Those are children. And there's a Children's Act that specifically criminalizes that.
I mean, Robert, do you agree that laws reflect a people's aspiration, their beliefs, and their culture?
LGBT people are people who live in Ghana. So they should also be heard.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get the point, but I'm just asking a simple question. I mean, regardless of LGBTQ or whatever issue, on the principle, do you agree that laws reflect the general aspirations of a people?
Yes, I agree that's...
So there's a Pew Research, and Pew is world globally renowned research institute, renowned for they did research in 2015, and I'm told there's a recent one that surveyed homosexual beliefs and acceptance in countries. They asked the question, should society accept homosexuality? Should society accept homosexuality? In Ghana, they found 96% of those they surveyed said Ghanaian society should not accept homosexuality. Now, if you believe that laws reflect the people's aspiration, you have 96% of Ghanaians saying we should not accept it. Why don't we pass a law that reflects this aspiration?
Because passing a law to reflect this aspiration infringes on the existence of a people who cause no harm. Where is this understanding of society coming from to agree to say that we should not accept such people? It is coming from an understanding of lack of education and lack of awareness about this community because it's a minority group of people. And those minority group of people obviously will not be heard. Out of the 100, there was a number that was 4. And therefore, they are also part of the people. One, if you hear this conversation, like I said before, there are things that Parliament said. Recently, we are going to buy cars, some V8s and things. How many Ghanaians agree that we should go and buy cars for MPs? There are things that have been said in Parliament, that there are laws that are going to be passed. How many people agree that Parliament is living up to its expectation, or a particular thing is being done, but it still goes ahead and is done? So we should not base this on popularism and popularity. It is supposed to be based on, listen, you say that you do not accept the sexual orientation of another person. Does it affect you as an individual, specifically, violently in any way?
Okay.
Does it affect you every morning when you wake up and you're going to work? Is there a homosexual who is stopping you from going to work? Or has homosexuality stopped us from having our prices of fuel rising? Those proponents of this law should show that homosexuality, or the fact that somebody is having sex in their bedroom, is affecting the way that people would eat food or drink, or the effect. The Honorable mentioned about the issue of money being spent on HIV and sexual MSMs. The most important thing you should understand is that, unfortunately, because of this popularity thing that you just mentioned and the minorityness of LGBT people, governments like Ghana do not support or do not have any funding to support these people. And therefore, it's important that you understand that if people are suffering from violence, people are suffering from the fact that because they are a minority, people push them up and abuse them. And so there is the need for them to be supported. Why do you think that it's not good that we give money to ensure that people are protected, their human rights are protected? Like I mentioned, there is research that shows violence against the community. There's research that shows that families are rejecting. Last week, I was on an interview with some MPs who clearly said, one of the MPs, and I hope that you can get the video, and said, I'll shoot my son if he comes to me and says that he's gay. Imagine the number of young people going through such a thing in their homes.
Robert, stay with me. Stay with me. I want to bring in Dr. Charles Rakuber, who's now joining us on the telephone line. Hopefully, we can have a good connection to him. Doc, where do you stand on this debate?
I'm neither for banning nor for legalizing. That's where I stand.
Why are you attempting to be neutral on this very important matter?
I'm not neutral. I'm not neutral at all. But my position is that people are there's not a monolith of culture. Certainly not in this country. There's so many ethnic groups that we haven't arrived at any cultural position. Neither is there a monopoly of religion in the country. We are not an Islamic republic. We are not and even Islamic republics, you have Shias and you have others who don't even accept Ahmadiyyas. So there's a very difficult thing about when we talk about cultural values and all of that, and a lot of this is coming from an imposition of a particular religion in a society that says we are a secular society with freedom of religion. It's not a question of I'm neutral. And we should be very, very careful about this issue of majority and minorities. Because if we go down that route, we'll almost be justifying why, let's say, there's racial discrimination in some northern countries. Because clearly there the white man is more than the black. And so we shouldn't really push this majority question. A tyranny of the majority should never be a yardstick. The protection of minorities is very, very important. So I think we should carry out this conversation. And if I may take on my colleague engineer, but my nephew, honorable. We engineers, we have certainty about solutions. But this kind of thing we are talking about, I don't think we should be having certainties based on our so-called moral perspective and our religious preference. What is morality in Ghana? I don't know that there is a particular morality that defines us as a people. We have different religions, we have different ethnic groups, we have different, many things, which also tend to affect what becomes our morality depending on where we are coming from. So I think we should be very, very, very careful on this almost certain position of what is right and what is wrong. My view is tolerance. I'm almost 70 years old. I grew up in Kumasi, where the society of the early 1960s were tolerant of Kojo BCS. Through to the 80s and 90s in Ghana, where the most popular night spots were night spots where there were open gays mixing with open heterosexuals, and everybody tolerated each other. To the time that I did Ghana 50, where again, there was a great tolerance of different types of people in the society. So I'm always for tolerance. I'm very, very much against intolerance.
I mean, should I say that if you are for tolerance, then you are opposed to the bill? Is that would be a fair way to put it?
Look, I wouldn't even talk about opposed to or for the bill. I mean, I respect the right of people who hold certain very strong views to try to push a certain narrative. Personally, I didn't like, and I don't like the way the Australian person threatened the Honorable, neither do I like the way in which the Speaker of Parliament, which is supposed to be a neutral, in my view, to ensure that different discourse and different perspectives, have decided that he will become the champion of a particular bill. I'm not too clear about that. I'm sorry about the Australian trying to threaten the Honorable about why he shouldn't push what he's pushing. But again, you see, the irony is that both of them are right. The Honorable is right to defend stuff in his country according to his constitution. And the diplomat is also right in terms of they can refuse you entry into their country, never mind who you are. Even the president, when he has to travel, let's say, to the UK on an invitation of the British government, still needs a visa to travel there. So it's unfortunate that there was this altercation. But as far as the bill is concerned, I mean, when it is actually launched into Parliament, then we'll know what it looks like, and we will be able to look at it in the context of our Constitution. I mean, what Honorable may determine as being within the Constitution may not be my perspective of what is in the Constitution. I mean, I hold to the view, for example, that you cannot implement this bill in terms of enforcement and the justice system without you having to call on the Consolidated Fund of Ghana in terms of the police and judges. And if you look at Article 108(2), that immediately, in my view, disqualifies that bill, because that bill must emanate from the executive. So those issues will come up when the bills are laid and proper challenges are put down. But my position is I'm neither for banning nor am I for legalizing.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, to my senior and my uncle, Charles Rakuber Tazan, one thing that I know is that engineers are never ambivalent. Engineers take a definite position on issues, and so he seems to be ambivalent on this. But let's be clear as well.
Ambivalent. All I'm saying is that engineers, there's only one solution.
Absolutely, uncle. But as an engineer, you know that there is no solution that's 100%. But you look at the highest level of efficiency. What seems to give you the best probability in your test becomes your model as standard. And that's what I'm saying, that when you look at a Ghanaian society and you model the Ghanaian society, what gives you a certain basis as a standard, if you're going to use the engineering principles, will be the view of the majority. And that cannot be termed to be the tyranny of the majority.
Look, I wouldn't go with this view of the majority, because otherwise we'll be purging minorities all over the place because we say that they are not the majority of our population. I think it's a very dangerous threat to go on this majority argument. We use it for choosing governments. Hold on. In a liberal democracy, it tends to be one of the ways we choose governments. We can also use proportional representation, etc. But in terms of tolerating, I mean, I heard you talk about medical conditions. There are many medical conditions and deformities by this kind of reasoning, we'll be putting people away to death and ostracizing them and purging them, which really is not the way we want to go.
Uncle, can you give me one example? One example of a medical condition that one of the medical conditions you're referring to? If you can just give me one. That by which reason, if we apply this, we will put people to jail?
I wouldn't give you one because you can search it for yourself. Because
there is none, uncle. But anyway.
No, sorry. I'll give you one. And I've said it before, and people have gotten upset about it. If you are an albino in Eastern and Southern Africa, you almost certainly be run out of town and killed for ritualism. Do you know that?
Sure. Well, and that's why.
Now, so we wouldn't do that here.
Why? Because the majority of us agree. The majority of us agree that should not happen.
We We don't do that here. We tolerate albinoism. We live with them, whereas it is a medical condition as defined by you people.
Okay.
It's a medical condition.
Doc, stay with me. Let me get some to wrap up on the point. But the fundamental point is, how do you do this, but also ensure that protection for the minority group?
Minorities have their rights.
I mean, Doc, give me a second. Just hold on for me. Give me a quick second.
Okay.
Let me hear from...
Minorities would always have their rights protected, okay? And take, for example, when you take this bill protects the rights. See, and that's why I say let's draw the distinction. Rights are not absolute, first and foremost. And rights are spelled out in this 1992 Constitution. In this Constitution, homosexuality or sexual preference is not a right. Sexual preference is not a right, as guaranteed by the 1992 Constitution. Now, rights as they emanate from the Constitution can even be curtailed on the basis of three pillars: public health, public morality, public safety. It's on the basis of those rights we are curtailing the rights of people's religious expressions by saying that they are extreme and they are fundamentalist, and on the basis of that we call them terrorists. Yet we curtail it on the basis of public safety and public morality. It's the same way. Majority, using the albino example, majority of people in Eastern Africa deem it right to go after that people with those conditions. That is how come it's become acceptable there. Majority of people in Ghana are tolerant of that medical condition and see it as a medical condition, and know that there is the majority of us have taken a position that we are tolerant of it. If majority of us have taken a position that we are not tolerant of accepting sexual preference and perversion, we have the same rights to take that position. Now, you see, Robert makes a point about the WHO and vaccines that we take and medicines that we take. Yes, even the COVID vaccines, when the WHO says a vaccine is well and right for us to use, we don't use it immediately in Ghana. We subject it to the FDA. The WHO's acceptance of a vaccine is based on science. Science. And even when they base it on science, we subject it to our own scientific test here with the FDA. That is why it is only AstraZeneca and Sputnik that have been passed. We hear currently the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer is also undergoing, and the Pfizer one, I think Moderna, are undergoing. So it means we also do a local check of the science. Show me the science behind homosexuality. One, he admits that there is no homosexual gene. Good. And so there is no science to back this argument that they make, that it's a biological thing. That's how they are made up. If you yourself admit that there is no biological evidence to it. Again, he talks about violence against LGBTQ people. Look, I'm going to read you an article from the 14th of June, 2021, on The Guardian, the UK, The Guardian. 2021 on pace to be the deadliest yet for trans and gender non-conforming Americans. As of 14th of June, 2021, 21 Americans, transgender, and gender non-conforming persons had been killed. Show me one in Ghana that has been killed. So when you talk about tolerance, and you talk about violence, and you talk about the attacks on these persons, show me one person who has been killed in Ghana on the basis of their gender non-conformity. 21, as of June 14th this year, had been killed in the United States. When you talk about human rights, we should not take a lecture from countries like the United States. The United States withdrew from the United Nations Human Rights Commission simply because we wanted to have an investigation into the human rights track record of the US government. Ghana has solid human rights records that we will protect. Now, you see, this final thing, this whole thing about show me what it is that is bad about two consenting adults, don't reduce it to that argument. That argument is moot. I've established here that your consenting adults having sex goes beyond just what they do in their rooms. And what we are speaking against is the advocacy. And who told you that that is natural? Have you looked at that? You said you are a researcher into sexual anatomy and all of that. Look at the human anatomy. The anus is, and forgive me, this is morning TV. The anus is not designed to be penetrated. And that is why when the anus is repeatedly penetrated, you have a medical disorder. So it is unnatural. It is not the natural way of things.
But we do oral sex. That's also unnatural. I mean, and the argument is that if you pass this, it's and by extension also criminalizing. Again,
that's incorrect. When you read section 6.3, which is where they make conclusion. It says, for the purposes of this section, sexual intercourse occurs, and sexual intercourse is in parentheses, occurs where a person penetrates the anus or mouth of another person with the penis of that person or other contraptions. Now, this says it's in reference for the purposes of this subsection.
This is the bill.
This is the bill.
That's what you're proposing.
Yes, it says for this section. Now, which section is it? Section 6. Now, the only place in this whole bill that sexual intercourse is used, for which it has been defined, is in section 6(1)(a). And it says, a person commits an offense if the person engages in a sexual intercourse between or among persons of the same sex.
So you're saying
even
that
if your wife is the one giving you head, or you are the one giving her head, you are
under
not the
this
same
bill
sex.
is fine. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's wrap up here. Let me take a quick final thoughts from you, Robert, and then I'll come to Dr. Charles Rakuber, and then we'll, of course, take a quick break. Robert?
It's sad to hear an MP saying that we have to wait to see killing before we do something about a minority group of people. It's sad.
I have not said that anywhere.
And it's worrying that when somebody tells you that people are facing violence, your answer will be that let's see people die and killed before we do something about it.
But Robert, to be fair to him,
so cheap.
He just mentioned a factual example in the US and says, show me evidence here that you've had a similar measure of violence against homosexuals. That's simply what he said. I mean, you're reading too much into that.
No, that is why I'm saying that if you're saying I should show you an example of a death situation in Ghana, then that is why I'm also saying that if he likes, I'll be happy to take his contact and give him all the research and the data that we have. But apart from that, if there is violence against LGBT people, I think that when we hear that some people are facing violence, we should be more empathetic towards it. And rather, unfortunately, our bill also criminalizes anybody who is empathic towards LGBT people. I think that it's also important in my concluding statement to say that reducing sexuality to anal sex is wrong. I've said it before, that sexuality is not about anal sex. There's sexuality between two females that is different. Sexuality is on a spectrum. Let's not limit it to anal sex and put our argument on it. It's also wrong to always compare. I've heard Honorable making several times statements of terrorism and comparing it to this situation. And I'm saying again, LGBT people are human beings. They don't need to show any gene, like how heterosexual doesn't need to show a gene that they are heterosexual. That is why I'm saying that there's no need for us to discuss about genes, because sexuality is not about genes. We are born as human beings and we are born with our sexuality, and there's no gene of showing anything. It's important that we continue to talk about human rights, as he's also trying to do, that we talk about protecting people and protecting their rights as enshrined. Article 21, this bill criminalizes a lot of things, and it also takes away Article 21 rights of a lot of people in Ghana, not just LGBT people, but a lot of people. And I think that's important that we look at this carefully in the process of going through this.
I mean, Dr. Rakuber will be very quick concluding thoughts on this.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get involved in the discussion of what is right and what is wrong. All I'll say is that since my fellow engineer has been so emphatic on what are rights, my view is that even Section 104 could be unconstitutional according to our Constitution. 104 is from about 1960, our Constitution is 92. I think when this bill becomes formalized, i.e. when it gets its first reading, I suspect there will be many challenges to it at the Supreme Court, where our Constitution gives the judges the right to decide what is consistent with and what is not consistent with our Constitution. That is going to come. So I really want to get into a layman's opinionated discussion as to what is right and what is wrong.
Dr. Charles Rakuber, thank you. Sam, thank you also on this.
I'll get 20 seconds.
No, I mean, I'll give you the last. This is the last round of comments.
I was just going to assure him that the human rights of LGBTQ persons, human rights for free trial, is enshrined in Section 22 or Clause 22 of the bill.
Free trial.
It says, yes, where it actually criminalizes extrajudicial treatment of persons with homosexuality.
I saw that in the bill. Yeah.
And anybody who assaults, verbally harasses, or physically assaults a person on the basis of their LGBTQ affiliation can go to jail for up to 3 years. They're not talking about that.
Please also give me a quick one to address that one as well. Then why do we need this law to criminalize people, as you have done in Section 2 of the law? Then why do you criminalize people for holding up themselves as gay, lesbian, bisexual?
Question. I'm grateful for all your thoughts on this. Sam, Robert, and Dr. Charles Rakuber. When we return from this quick break, so the finance minister was in Parliament on Thursday with the media budget review. As many said, he almost, indeed actually swerved the expectation that he was going to ask for more money. And some have been suggested there was going to be additional taxes. He came in and was emphatic. I don't want more money. I'm not going to tax you more. I simply came to update you. That, I must say, was not expected. The minority had already poured cold water on it, claiming, well, listen, I just give you to the end of the year. We can bet he will be spending far more than he actually has to spend in the year's period. We'll put that to the test when we return. Remember the big deal also in the media budget review, the 1 million jobs agenda that he announced, the creation of a youth bank, and the president came with a special message to the youth, and he said in essence that I hear your pain and I will fix it. So did the media budget review statement that the finance minister read on Thursday, did it meet your expectation? We're going to reshuffle the pack a bit as far as the panelists are concerned when we return, and then we'll deal with these, as something says, vex matters. Stay with us.
Repeat, I'm not here today to ask for more money. I have not come